single out Syria. As I mentioned, it's the one that is most exploding, if you will, not only the just sheer horrific bloodshed on the ground, between 400 and 500,000 Syrian civilians killed during the course of the war so far. As I mentioned, the displacement of over half the population, some 40 to 45% of that displaced outside the country. The conditions are just terrible in many of the areas. Huge impact, obviously, on Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, especially, but then even affecting, again, our NATO allies, and causing enormous challenges there that contributed, in fact, to the kind of domestic populism, this ultra-nationalism, xenophobic sentiment that is really dangerous. And frankly, you see a tiny bit of that here from time to time, not perhaps with these refugees, but with some others. And so I think that that is clearly the one that, again, from any perspective, whether it's a humanitarian perspective, a military perspective, this is where, of course, you have on one side the murderous regime of Bashar al-Assad, who every time he teeters is supported by another organization of ill repute. First it was the Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force, then it was Lebanese Hezbollah, there have been Shia militia funded and trained and equipped by Iran, and then ultimately you have Russia with its air power, and adding enormous complication to the situation, almost adding this is way beyond regional now. This is really an international conflict in certain respects. And on the other side, you've got the Sunni Arab majority of the country, the Syrian Kurds, and a coalition led by the United States. But indeed, within these, there are cross-cutting currents. And of course, this is one of those countries where it's not necessarily the case that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In some cases, it's the opposite of that. So I think that particular situation is one that is very, very dangerous, and it keeps getting worse. I have felt I've called publicly for some time for a safe zone, which would allow refugees to stay inside the country. Remember, there's two rules with refugees. Number one is do everything you can to allow them to stay in their own country. Number two is if you can't do that, then at least keep them in a neighboring country. And finally, the EU has very pragmatically cut a deal with Turkey. Gave them $8 billion or so to establish very large refugee camps just north of the Syrian border, and that has both alleviated the problem that was causing such challenges in Europe, but it also gives them the prospect of going home once this can be sorted out. If you can have a safe zone inside, indeed there is a safe zone now. Turkey has pushed all the way in, and is indeed establishing a de facto safe zone. They're going to push it down to another key city, it appears, which will be very important. There's de facto a safe zone where the U.S. Special Operations Forces are operating out further in the northeastern part of the country, where you have the Syrian Kurds and also the Free Syrian Army elements that, as has been announced very recently, are going to begin setting the conditions for the liberation of Raqqa from the Islamic State. I have gone further and said that we should have a no-fly zone. Before we think this is so extraordinarily difficult, let's remember that we had a no-fly zone for some 12 years, from the end of the Gulf War until the invasion of Iraq. And it protected the Kurds in the north, and it protected the Marsh Arabs and some of the Shia Arabs in the southern part of Iraq. It was a burden, and we're going out to the region during those times. The executive officer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, took a lot of assets, but it was doable. And that was a much vaster area, frankly.
It was two no-fly zones simultaneously.
It was, and two air operations centers and all the rest. Beyond that, I think that it is inaccurate to say, as some do, that there is no military solution to this problem. At the very least, I'm not sure that Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin have gotten that memo, or at that least don't embrace the concept, because they seem intent on trying to achieve a military solution. And they're doing it with Grozny rules. This is Chechnya. This is if the The area won't submit, you just depopulate it, and you bomb hospitals with bunker busters, you bomb population centers with these horrific barrel bombs that the regime has used and so forth. And again, there should be no fly zone to protect the safe area, and indeed, if this kind of activity continues, Bashar al-Assad should understand that his air force will be grounded, which again could be done with air and sea launched cruise missiles pretty handily. But we at the very least just crater the runways, and you can take that out. Yes, there is a much more dangerous situation now with Russian air power there. But again, as everyone knows, Vladimir Putin is someone who responds, he stops when something immovable is encountered, and that requires a degree of firmness, not provocation, but a degree of firmness. And I think all of those elements need to be, in addition to providing for those who are fighting on the ground against both the Islamic State and Bashar al-Assad, shoulder-launched anti-tank guided missiles in larger numbers, and also some shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. These are sensitive without question. There are inherent risks with them, but as the ambassador knows, there are options that you can employ, could include, for example, special operators from some of the other countries to verify certain things, or other technological means that you could use as a safeguard as well. So again, all of those, I think, are in order, frankly, given the horrific situation. And frankly, then also, I think that we are going to have to acknowledge that it's at least fairly likely that Syria may not be put back together again. The idea of a central government that has any links to the regime having real influence over the Sunni Arabs who have suffered so much under it is very difficult. Or the Kurds. The Kurds clearly going to have a semi-autonomous, or that's going to happen, I think, regardless. So, start on such a somber note that everyone who knows that this is a huge, horrific, tragic situation.
Let's lighten it up a little bit.